Welcome back to Keto Krime. Today we're going to talk about Chad Daybell's James and Elena's romance novel. We're going to talk about that. But we're also going to talk about a whole genre of fiction that I had no idea was out there. There is a whole pantheon of LDS literature, including romance novels, that I wasn't even aware was a thing. And there are authors out there that I actually enjoy that were either raised Mormon or raised in the Mormon tradition, i.e. Stephanie Meyer of Twilight fiction was raised Mormon, attended BYU. Pretty sure she broke with her faith with those movies, but, with those books. But yeah, there's a whole, pantheon out there, and I do apologize. I am having some allergy issues this morning. I was not planning to film today at all. I'm still preparing the rest of my 31 days of Halloween, but I decided I'd go ahead and jump into this. So yeah, and I want to put a disclaimer out there. I am not making fun of LDS literature. Who am I to make fun of an established genre of literature that evidently millions of people enjoy? So that is not what I'm doing. I'm simply talking a little bit about the background of LDS literature, and then we're going to jump into this monstrosity. So with that being said, let's do it. And as always, this video is brought to you by our brand new full channel partner, Keto Crisp. The wonderful folks over at tastecando.com have officially signed on to partner with me in both my weight loss journey, which I am back on now, as well as sponsoring the channel. They have signed me up for a brand new affiliate program, so if you click the link down below, as well as put in my discount code, you'll receive 15% off your first order, and I do get a tiny commission if you do purchase. So it helps the channel, and you get something tasty and healthy. These are great bars. They satisfy. They keep you full for a long time. They have a lot of great nutrients, a lot of great natural ingredients. And for those of us in the keto and low-carb world, we've often been demonized as not a friend to the animals. But these are 100% plant-based. So you can feel good about that too if you are of the vegetarian or vegan keto lifestyle. These are also for you. So with that being said, I want to say a huge shout out to Keto Crisp for sponsoring the channel and helping me to stay on the air here. And thank you all. So if you'd like to order some, definitely check them out below. I appreciate it. So to dive into early LDS works of literature, you have to go all the way back to the original founders. Joseph Smith wrote things down. He was evidently a very big fan of narrative literature. He wrote lots of things, but then when we kind of jump forward to Brigham Young, who from the Elmom, I understand, was not such a nice guy, not the nice guy that Chad Daybell made him out to be in his Aaron for Emma book, that he was kind of a killjoy, very violent, and as a result, writing of LDS literature took a backslope, whereas perhaps fiction had been used as a method of storytelling and for getting over of certain, references, certain lessons, which has kind of always been a thing. If you look back at world religions or civilizations in general, fiction has always been used to tell a story. You can take this all the way back to the myths of, Greece and Rome. I mean, those were obviously, we now know them as fiction. Perhaps at the time they thought they were real, but even then, now they've still been used to kind of purvey what the Greeks and the Romans and even the Norse really thought was real, even though they are obviously fiction. But these things have been, and I could say the same because I'm an atheist about, I'm not even going to get, this is not an atheist debate. But fiction has always been used as a method of storytelling, and often it was oral tradition. passed down. So the Mormons were no different. And you can take it all the way back, like I said, to the founding. But evidently, Brigham Young was not just a violent guy who was an overall killjoy, but also he did not think that fiction had a place. He considered novels and fictional stories a waste of time. So from more nonfiction works, most LDS literature centered around how-to books, why books, books on heavy theology, books on how to be a proper Mormon wife, how to be a proper Mormon husband, all these things. Until, perhaps after he passed on, they realized maybe he was full of crap in a lot of ways, and so they decided to take a foray back into more fiction. And honestly, I was really surprised to hear this. So, in the late 1800s, 1880s, when that whole Brigham Young, fiction is bad, fiction is a waste of time kind of thing faded out, you did have more LDS writers getting into the realm of fiction to parlay the same message as perhaps the nonfiction books were. You had and also women. LDS women started diving into it, including Brigham Young's own daughter, Susa Young Yates, wrote a very popular romance novel, John Stevens' Courtships, in 1909. But probably the most famous work to come out between the just after Brigham Young period into the early 1900s was Added Upon by Nephi Anderson, which was a fictional account of a family's journey through time and space and seeing their ancestors, almost a forerunner to maybe what Daybell wrote a little bit, at least in the Emma series. So it's obvious that Daybell, who spent a lot of time at the BYU library in Rexburg, had read a lot of these early works. I mean, that's pretty obvious. I mean, he's taking, and I don't know what you call it, plagiarizing, but he's taking cues from them all over. So it's very, very obvious that he is an aficionado of early LDS literature. So with Brigham Young's daughter and Nephi Anderson, you had a new explosion of LDS fiction. And so it has remained, the same. There's a whole genre out there of different types of literature. Home literature is considered kind of what Nephi Anderson did, in that they kind of explain origins of the faith through fictional accounts of families that go back in time and see. Also, they may use this to teach people how to uphold good Mormon values. Look at Jason Mount's books, a whole retelling of the Book of Mormon. So I think that would kind of fall into this genre if you had to label it. Home literature is still around, but then we also have another genre of LDS literature called Lost Generation. This was prevalent between the 1930s and the 1970s, where it kind of told the whole epic story of the Mormon religion from Nephi through to the early settlers. Kind of tells the origin in a very epic fashion, no different than any other religion or even civilization has kind of built up their founding to prolific I mean, look at any number of movies that Mel Gibson has done based on historic events. We all do this. Lots of times, the best way that we purvey our values and our systems is through fiction. Things that hold the imagination, because sometimes a very dry nonfiction book isn't what you're looking for. And I think that after Brigham Young, even his daughter saw the value in fiction. So it really, really exploded. And a lot of these historical novels, historical stories have won Newbery Awards. They've won very, very prestigious literary awards. So we're not talking about, don't think that Chad Daybell, Melanie Gibb, any of these clown posses that we've been following are indicative of true Mormon literature. There's some really good, fantastic stories written by LDS Stephanie Meyer, even though she's probably not a practicing Mormon. Twilight, and then, of course, 50 Shades of Grey by virtue of Twilight. Not that that's great literature, but it's fun. Have been written. So don't discount a whole genre of literature just because of one crackpot or a couple of crackpots. Mormon literature is still written today. A lot of it has been put into a category called faithful realism, where they kind of take fictional stories and meld them with real-life crises of faith. So again, just another way of storytelling. Storytellings evolve. And then we get into Mormon romance, LDS romance. And yes, there is a whole genre of LDS romance out there. Most of them are what you would call period pieces. A lot of them are set in the early days of the LDS Church in the 1800s, making them very lofty, romantic. There's not a lot of sexual, there's not any sex going on in them. It's all kind of a spiritual connection, which I think is what Daybell tried to emulate in his. Did he succeed? No, he didn't. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But a lot of them are just like you would see in any Harlequin. If you've ever read a Harlequin romance novel, the story is there, but there's no sex. That's kind of where a lot of these LDS romance novels fall. And a lot of them are period pieces, where chivalry, where things like that have kind of gone to the wayside are still there. Now, am I going to make fun of this genre? Absolutely not, because if you're like me and a fan of early English literature, Victorian literature, Shakespeare, you've got to give these things their proper place. But I love Jane Eyre. Jane Eyre is one of my favorite books of all time, and it is one of the most romantic, heart-throbbing books I've ever read. But yet, there's no sex. It's implied, but there's no sex. Mormon LDS literature would fall into the same category of true romantic literature as any of these other. I'm not saying they're on the same level, but it's the same category. So, Wuthering Heights. As you can see, I'm obsessed with the Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility. All these great books. Mormon is kind of that same thing, where it plays up the tension, but there's no actual sex. And that's fine. To each his own. I love that kind of romantic literature. They're not romance novels in the same way we consider romance novels. Romance novels are basically written softcore, whatever, in a lot of ways. A lot of them are. And I love those books too. I love a good smut book. But the romance novels can be either or. It means romantic interludes, maybe breaking mores and traditions of the time in which they're set. That's what romance is. So, are they true romance? Yes, absolutely. And you can find them out there. If you like Harlequin, or if you're a fan of period pieces, there's a whole plethora of them. I mean, a lot of them play up LDS themes, but they're out there. A lot of publishers, Covenant Books, I'm not sure if you pronounce it Desert or Desert Books. I'm going to say Desert. Deseret News. Lots of different publishers out there do exclusively LDS content. And there's a lot of LDS authors on Harlequin, believe it or not. A lot of the Western-themed are Harlequin. I'm a big fan of Western. My dad grew up reading Louis L'Amour, so I have read a lot of LDS authors. Not even I realize I read LDS authors, because that's when their religion came of age, is during the Old West. So I've read a lot of them, didn't even know I read them. I grew up also reading the Laura Ingalls Wilder Little House on the Prairie book, so a lot of the LDS books are very similar to that in how they tell a story. So I'm a fan. I think they're great, and there's something out there for everyone. So with that being said, did Chad Daybell succeed in writing a Mormon romance novel? Well, has he succeeded in writing really any sort of novel? No, but with all this being said, to talk about how I don't want a whole genre of literature to get crapped on because of him, let's jump in and take a look at his romance story. All of this comes from the recent document drop that Chandler, Arizona police did as a result of their investigation into the death of Charles Vallow. And along with this story that was sent to Lori from Chad via text, there's also other very telling things, such as Charles Vallow may have been in contact with Tammy Daybell, trying to warn her what was going on. Lots of heated discussion between Lori and Charles before his death. So I think it really paints a picture of two people that had fallen for each other and wanted out of their respective relationships. And then also texts where Chad was very gleefully telling Lori that Tammy had been possessed by a woman named Viola. And then almost gleefully telling her that she passed away in the middle of the night. You know, I understand that Chad's children are going to stand by him, and I completely understand why that's some cognitive dissonance going on there. But the fact he was so gleeful over your mom's death, isn't that the least bit wrong in your eyes? I mean, come on, that's the only thing I would ask. I understand you're all very faithful people, and maybe to somebody that's not a Mormon, it's not religious at all, death means something totally different to me than it does any religious person. So maybe that's where I'm missing the mark. But it just seems repugnant in a way. But anyway, Chad, there was a lot of communications, emails, opening up this whole story that I think is going to unfold. I think Lori Vallow will end up going to trial for the murder of Charles Vallow, even though she'll probably continue to push, you know, I'm not fit to stand trial in Idaho, but in Arizona there is a not guilty by virtue of insanity, so I think she'll be forced to stand trial in Arizona. I really do. I hope they get her on something. Even though it's not really justice for Tylee and JJ, I want her to be punished for something she's done. But anyway, so a lot of text and emails opening up the story that there was a lot of plotting, which we all kind of knew going on in the background. But that being said, this happened in July of 2019. On July 13th, he sent Lori a message saying, "I'm heading to bed so that I can come snuggle tightly against you." And this is evidently after they had met at the the Mormon LDS Prepper Convention. And so he's talking about, I want to go to sleep so I can come snuggle against you, you know, kind of playing up that transcendent being that he often said, connection they often had. You're truly my best friend on earth and throughout eternity. See you in a minute. Okay. And then 7/14, he began sending her this quote-unquote romance novel in form of text with two characters by the name of James and Elena. Let's dive in. It's basically 2 chapters long in the form of text. It shows the story of James, a LDS writer, spiritual writer, aka Chad, who is going to a conference in St. George, Utah, to sell his books, and he receives, through his God tear, some message from on high saying, "You will meet somebody today that will change your life forever." And then he gets there and he sees Elena, aka Lori, and is smitten with her, and he realizes, oh, this is what that voice was talking about. Now, no mention as of yet if James or Lori's characters are married. There's a character called NG. I don't think I need to reference who that is. That introduces James now in person to this lady Elena, and Elena immediately touches James' soul. So we have Melody Gibb introducing Lori to Chad, and she was gorgeous, she was vivacious, she was making James' heart go all pity-pat, and he felt that he knew her, that he had known her for a long time, and perhaps this is what the voice would be talking about. And then she talked to him about his novel, The Renewed Earth, in the Standing on Holy Ground series. I'll link that playlist up here if you want to hear my take on it. So James and Eleanor are very similar to Chad and Lori. So, and now he says he could remember how they had known each other in the past and how he was just smitten with her. It's all over the place. So the next day, James is doing his talk on his novels, and he mentions a scene that Elena had mentioned to him during their talk, and he talks about it. He knew exactly where she was going to be sitting because his God tear told him, and he just talks and talks, and then he gets up and he goes to his table, hopefully to autograph or sell some books. And then Elena comes up, starts talking to him, and actually jumps behind the table and starts helping him sell books. And I think that Lori actually helped Chad sell his books at a particular conference that they met at. So they're selling books, and he says once the book sales slow down, implying that people actually want to buy his drivel, he says that he actually finally had a chance to look into Elena's eyes, and they talked of things, and he was not a very open, sharing person, but he felt he could trust her. And then they had this conversation how they both felt that they were on a mission to free the world of darkness, and how he realized at that moment he could trust her, and she was the most important thing in the world to him, and they had known each other's before, and he became quite amorous toward her, i.e., I guess little Chud stood up. How his physical attraction was so enamored, they went on a walk together, but luckily Elena, who is the paragon of virtuosity, has basically dressed in several layers of clothing so that he could not truly tell that she had the body of a goddess. And he would not have so much to fantasize about. So, yeah. I could say a whole lot about how very religious men love to make women cover up because they can't control their fantasies, but shouldn't be that. I wasn't planning on that to be that long of a video. Maybe I'll do a video on that, but for right now, let's just say Chad is glad Lori covered up, or excuse me, James is glad Elena covered up. And so, just this wonderful, glorious day of him thinking of her and trying to see her butt through 18 layers of clothing. So they wrote down James's table. They carried the books up to where he was storing them, and then they exchanged cell phone numbers. End of chapter 1. And so that night, in bed, they're texting each other. They text each other to 4 a.m. According to James, he got up to change clothes and go see her, but the Spirit told him to remain calm, that all would happen in due time. And then he had a fantasy of how their spirits met and joined and cuddled and did all the things they wanted to do. So, spiritual sex is what we're talking about here, people. Thank goodness he didn't get into graphic detail about it, though I'm thinking he probably wanted to if he hadn't had these delusions of grandeur of him being this great holy man. So he woke up the next day feeling as though he had made love to her all night, and then he actually texted her and said that he's deeply regretted they couldn't spend more time with each other, but they would get to know each other more. And then he packed up his car and drove home to wherever James's home is, I suspect Salem, Idaho. So they text the entire time. Of course, Chad is texting and driving. I wouldn't suspect anything else. And then he gets home, and then the weekend passes. Monday morning, he actually has a phone call with her where they discuss more about their mission to clear the earth of darkness, and he realizes she is Saint Almighty. She is the Virgin Mary reincarnated. I'm embellishing here, but for the most part. And how she was the most wonderful thing that has ever come into his life. And, yeah. And remember, this is October. So then we kind of fast forward to them texting and talking into November. And he talks about how they had talked on the phone every day. He was impressed with her intelligence and personality and humor. I don't get that from, Dime Store Barbie, but okay, whatever. And then he talked about how she was his wife when they lived in, I guess, Old Jerusalem, and they were good friends of Jesus, and how Jesus liked them together, and how this was great, and how he knew they were going to be reunited. And then there was this other conference they were going to where they would actually meet each other in person again. So fast forward to this conference, and they meet up, and he actually invites her back to his hotel room because, no chance anything's going to happen. And so they get there, and they kiss, and then they end up still fully clothed with her straddling him on a couch. And then they're kissing, and, ugh! What did I get myself into? And so this is the first time James tells Elena he loved her. I'm sure all Lori and Chad did was over the clothes stuff. I'm positive that's all they did. Oh, and he felt like almost pressured or compelled to give her a blessing. That's what I think about when in a romantic interlude is a blessing. But okay. And so they both decide to change into more comfortable clothes, so athletic shorts and stuff, and he was able to see some side boobs, so he was really excited. And then they kissed and straddled some more, and then they decided to go to a temple to actually be blessed and sealed, I guess, because that happens in everyday interactions with LDS. They just meet somebody and straddle them and then go have, a blessing, whatever. So anyway, they go to whatever temple they're at, and they have the blessing, and then they talk about how they're so sexually attracted to each other and spiritually attracted to each other. This is a pile of drivel. And so after that, they're staying at someone's house, and they end up, settling in there, and then they're at this other reading of another Mormon author, and he feels this, something tell him, come stand behind me. And he goes in and he stands behind her, and I guess tries to catch a glimpse of whatever he's trying to catch a glimpse of. And then he realized he had texted her that, but he hadn't looked at the text. He just felt it in his spirit. So then they're back where they're staying, and she comes into his room that night, and they do more over the clothes stuff. I'm not going to get into detail. You can read that on East Idaho News if you'd like. I'll even put the link down below. And then they took another walk together, and then he flew home, but not before he gave her a special blessing, and that she was a majestic goddess and all this stuff, and end of story. So that's where the 2-chapter text romance novel actually ends, or romance story actually ends. Basically, we're probably getting an in-depth look into what happened between Chad and Lori, probably with some details left out when they first met during the course of their affair before Tammy's death. And then if you bleed that forward into him being so excited, it seems, about Tammy going dark. How could you make somebody who was probably a very loyal wife to you dark, and then so excited or not upset about her dying? And then we know what happened. Charles and Tammy both dead. They moved to Idaho, and then the whole thing. So we're really looking at 2 narcissists that found each other here. And, it's going to be a while before I can read any sort of romance novel, because I'm going to have never mind. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. This is kind of an impromptu video. But with that being said, I'll be back soon with more 31 Days of Halloween. And until next time, Keto Krime.